Hey everybody, say I wanted to shoot a real quick little segment here. Some people been asking on the fixed insert process of how well it handles thicker, bigger pieces of flint, and then I just wanted to join something. The other day there was a dispute on one of the forums I was on what constitutes abo, and and people doing slab is not abo, blah blah blah. Well, I mean, today's day and age, if you want to work exotic materials, quartzite, not far from where I live, you have the biggest rock and gem mineral show. Well, you can find your whole stones, exotic stones, but and I certainly prefer working spalls and demonstrate doing that as much as possible. But when it comes to exotic materials, you're really going to need to get past that part of it, I think, a little bit, and not really get down on other people so much on when they're using slabs, because that's a lot of what materials out there. Now, the one thing is for a lot of the slab, the thickness that people are cutting it very thin, that's more geared towards the copper nappers, or you better have some real skill set being an abo, working with something that delicate. But I'll work with stuff I used to work with a long time ago, the glass for stained glass, and that was some finesse. But anyways, I wanted to demonstrate the the pivot and fixed insert process with some stitching, and on this piece of flint here. Now, this was just bought at the rock store. Still has some Cortex on the outside. It had a price tag of 20 bucks. Can't remember what it was I paid for it. But at any rate, you see the stitching that I'm doing here is pretty consistent going around the outside. And one thing where this really shines as well, the pivot and fixed insert, is in the stitching. Now, when it's the thinner pieces, when it's the regular size thickness of slabs, if you get slabs, you'll want to use the wedge device. That really works the best on getting your snaking, and that's a skill you're going to have even if you're doing spalls and everything, is to set knocking down those mesas and stitching back and forth. And so that's the way to look at this, just like one giant mesa across here, and you're going to need to make that into like some mountaintops, going back and forth. So just wanted to demonstrate that real quick. So how you do that is you stick this in the side, and you're able then to put some pressure into it. Now, the benefit with this is, one, I believe it lessens the end shock a great deal. It's a smaller insert tool, and that's another reason why I think that we're finding those tools, if they were used with this process, we still don't know. Nobody's, it's either I've stumbled on this process and it just works absolutely fantastic for me. I suggest you give it a try, see what you think. But for me, this is it. I'm hooked. But it lessens the end shock, and I believe. And nice thing is, like here, you can hit from this side, drive the flake this way. You can hit from this side, drive the flake that way. So go like this, push this in. Pow. Knock that off. I can take one more flake on that side. Brought that up to the other side. And this one here, I'm going to shoot it back that way. Actually, I need to be going from this end back this way instead of from this way to that way. It's always best to work your ends, save the middle thickness. But you'll find that doing this process like this, like I have, end shock is greatly reduced. Most of the time, if I screw up and the point breaks, it's because I didn't have a good enough platform, was trying to force something that was already telling me to take a look. I was just being lazy. So you can see this flint here doing pretty darn good. And for me, this is a lot faster as well. I'll do a demo with the antler. This is some buffalo horn. You can see what that looks like. It's just the tip and then cut down before it gets hollowed. This piece here was the same horn, just farther up where it was starting to get hollowed, so that's why it's a little bit twisted like that. And you can see I've made a chisel insert device out of that. And this one here is just an antler. It's a little bit long for what for what I've been seeing of could have beens in the archaeological record. They're usually a little bit shorter than this, but it's still not. Who's to say it wasn't a little longer and then they went down shorter? So again, it's a little bit longer, but same thing. Pow. You can see. And if you're needing to do bifacing, you have your leg here that you're using as an angle, up, down, for whatever you're trying to get your angle, and you're just hitting this to the side. I like to use the corner going this direction. You can go straight on, but I like to use the corner. So go here, pop that off, push into it. Nice flakes. And I'm not trying to drive into the stone yet. Now I can tell I'm starting to get to the end here, because you'll feel the stone will start to act a little bit differently. And what I may do is start to work the ends and then come back. You can see that took that. You generally want to work your ends, then come to the center. Save the mass. Wow. I took that piece out of there. Big time. I'm going to put the shorter one back on. Maybe even a little bit narrower of one. You can see I have a little fatter bulb one on the end, and these are remarkably similar to archaeological discoveries of wood that have been fractured along here, and they have no known use for them. And the end is sharpened, but it isn't used, which is consistent with this. Now I can turn this around and I can use it, and I believe that they possibly did too with having it as a tip. But to turn around and then use to push. But it's interesting that that the end is fractured and there's no use on the tip. And then also the ones that are the tip that have no use when they're pointed and you're not seeing any impact, well, guess what? That rules them out for consideration in archaeology for being a cylinder, for a punch or a drift, because they look at it and they go, oh, well, there's use on one end, but then there's no use on the other. Well, that told me that's certain that it's sticking it in something, just like this, sticking it in something. And really, this method here was used a long time ago, but it took 3 people, one person to hold the platform and the billet, and then the other person, third person, to strike it. Well, this seems to be just a way to get past that and do it yourself. Some people started to try to use their feet. Well, I mean, that was not try. That using the feet has been documented for a long time by the Spanish. With the Mayans and the Incans, they used their feet for okay. Mission accomplished. So now take this, start to do some work. So now see, I can put this along my arm, and I can put this on here like this, take my thumb along this ledge here, put this here like that, pow, pow. Put this down here on my leg. That's the nice thing with this. You can move it around, side, up, down. I'll just pinch this one. Oh shoot, it dropped. But you could see it, I believe, that it's running all the way over into here. So we just start doing that, slowly running them flakes in. Very thin flakes. Let's see. Anyways, that's all I got time for before my battery runs out, but